On the planet of Sera, humanity would live in a similar way to humanity on Earth. Focusing their efforts on culture, science, art and social living, humanity would desperately try to thrive in an age of peace, without warfare or fighting amongst each other for petty things. However, this would very quickly change, as humanity started to realise their golden age was running out of fuel to power everything. During this, scientists and oil companies would discover a strange luminous substance that they would label as Imulsion. Finding this source of energy, it suddenly became clear that they had found what they needed to survive, a substance that was capable of near limitless energy that could power everything within their society. But of course, this discovery only triggered warfare again, and as humanity fought over this cheap, precious resource to power their land, underground, something far more dangerous was forming. The army of the Locust was building their ranks, led by their Queen Mira. Unknown to humanity, but soon after their brutal war with one another, they would face a foe far more deadly that would see them fall back and face almost near extinction. Also unaware to them that their discovery of Imulsion was the trigger of this event that they would label as Emergence Day. But what were the events before Emergence Day? What are the Locusts? And what exactly happened on that day that forced humanity into a war that seemed unwinnable? Well, in today's video we explore all of the events that led to the Locust invasion. This is the story behind Gears of War's Emergence Day. Sera's history from the offset was littered with conflicts. From humanity's first written records, war was their primary focus. The first ever era within the beautiful Sera world was called the Age of Armageddon, which happened around 1000 years before the events of E-Day. Within this era, humanity almost brought the world of Sera to the brink of destruction. Conflicts would happen all over the surface of the planet, and this would go on for millennia. Every faction around the globe would fight against each other, desperate for land and resources. During this, the Silver Era took place, in which two of the founding empires, Kashkur and Gornassia, fought each other in a brutal conflict in an era of sword and chariot-based warfare. During this point, both of these empires were in the Golden Age and were fighting over the usual things, resources and land. Kashkur utilizing their silver mines, and Gornassia having a much larger population of 400 million people. As the millennia passed by, war got more and more brutal, with more destructive weapons ripping the land from under their feet and destroying the beautiful landscapes that humanity and its native population lived in. Eventually it was decided by all of humanity that war had to stop. If they continued down this path, the whole planet would face ultimate destruction and all of them would be wiped out. These discussions triggered the end of the Age of Armageddon and the start of the Era of Silence. Peace suddenly rang out amongst the population of Sera. Humanity could finally focus on rebuilding as well as its culture, science and arts. It was a new golden age for humanity. Everyone was working together for the good of Sera, and no one had to die anymore due to petty wars. However, there were problems. With the military being stripped of funds due to this era of peace, populations became anxious over the rising crime and the protection of civil liberties. Who would be there to protect them if anyone wanted to break this peaceful time? Politicians became desperate to debate these issues, but what they didn't realise was that the real issue that needed to be focused on was coming right round the corner. As humanity continued to focus on its golden age, it became evidently clear that all of humanity's energy reserves were running out. Nuclear fuel and hydrocarbon were almost completely dry, and the population was suffering because of it. Demand became high all over the planet as prices were rising by the minute. During this time, however, humanity had discovered this weird luminous substance which they labelled Imulsion. However, at this time, scientists were just more curious about what it was. They hadn't realised it was their solution to the problem they had on their hands. It was never clear where Imulsion came from or when exactly it was discovered. However, scientists began running tests to find that Imulsion was actually a parasitic fungal organism that was golden and highly volatile. The scientists also believed that it was created through the manure of riftworms who had been living on the planet for millennia, which would explain why the Imulsion was located underground in the hollow network where the riftworms lived their lives. As the tests continued to run within the science labs and as the oil rigs started finding more of it, mining for resources, it wasn't until Dr. Helen Cooper Cooper discovered that Imulsion could be used as an almost infinite source of energy. This was the solution to their problems, and thanks to Dr. Helen Cooper's work, she was able to create the light mass process where it could be refined into a usable fuel for humanity to use. The era of darkness in which humanity was now living in, thanks to the energy shortages, was now coming to an end thanks to the light mass process. Finally, they were able to continue where they left off from. They had a new energy resource which could power their cities, machinery, and vehicles. Humanity now had cheap energy, but there was another problem. The global economy was now in a ruin thanks to the panic that was caused because of the energy crisis before. There were only a few that weren't affected by this. Those were the nations which had endless access to Imulsion. Because of this, these nations became the envy of the world. Other nations needed what these nations had to survive, but felt like they were being just ignored. This was ruining relationships, and the threat of war was looming as those without Imulsion became more and more desperate. Eventually, the war lines were drawn between the two factions, the Union of Independent Republics against the coalition of ordered governments. This war would be labelled as the Pendulum Wars, and its sole goal was to get the precious resource of Imulsion to power their nations. But as this war raged on for 79 years, something else was happening as humanity continued to explore Imulsion and its effects, something that would inevitably lead to an even worse war for humanity. Both the COG and the UIR were losing soldiers in their thousands every day during the Pendulum Wars. Both of them threw everything at each other to either get the Imulsion or defend it for themselves. During the early years of the war, that was the sole focus, as both of these superpowers invaded poorer nations, colonizing them under the cloak of protection. Politicians within the COG at this point had also started to rebuild their nations, forming together the greatest minds within the COG nations. Here they created the island of Azura, which would be used as a bunker for the elite, in case a global catastrophe happened. One of the elite would be the scientist known as Dr. Niall Sampson. However, before he could get to the island, something had happened behind the scenes back within the COG homeland, something that he had to attend to. Back in the homeland, it was clear that Imulsion wasn't as glamorous as people thought. As the mining for it increased, more and more of the workers within the mines were getting sick due to overexposure. Because of it, it would be said that these victims contracted a condition known as rust lung, a condition that would destroy the cells within the lungs and would inevitably lead to an extremely painful death. Scientists such as Dr. Sampson were brought in to see if they could figure out a cure for this, as cases were rising dramatically, and mainly amongst the workers who came face to face with the substance. Due to this epidemic, the COG panicked and saw another economic crash coming because of it. In reaction to this, the Department of Health opened up the New Hope Research Facility, which would go on to house the children of the Imulsion poisoned miners, to help study the effects of Imulsion and eventually discover a cure for the rust lung epidemic. Whilst the scientists injected the children with small doses of Imulsion, it became clear to Dr. Sampson that the Imulsion caused immediate cell stress and caused almost instant death. However, it was shown in some cases that cells would undergo mutations. Continuing this research into the effects of rust lung, the scientists found nothing changed with what they were doing until they encountered one girl named Mira. Mira, after being given a dose of Imulsion, showed complete immunity to Imulsion, and on top of that, also gained more beneficial traits. She was able to gain cell regeneration, meaning she could age at 50% the rate of normal children, as well as a positive immune system. This was a breakthrough, finally the hope the scientists had been looking for. Mira was the key to it all. With this information, Dr. Sampson started to witness the indigenous creatures of the Hollow, and noticed that they were also completely unaffected by the effects of Imulsion. With this, Dr. Sampson merged the DNA of the children with the indigenous creatures of the Hollow, hoping to create a new creature that would be completely immune to the effects of rust lung. Here he created the creatures that would be named as sires, which were a combination of the Sera children and the native creatures of the Hollow. This, however, was a massive mistake on Dr. Sampson's behalf. The sires were not stable at all and continued to mutate. Their creation also meant that they were extremely distempered as well as sterile. Tons of them lost their sanity and higher brain functions, meaning they were extremely primitive and highly aggressive to anyone, making it almost impossible for them to be controlled. Only one of the sires was immune to this, and that was the child named Ukon, who was patient zero of rust lung. Ukon still kept his brain functions, but was still as sadistic sadistic as the other sires. Ukon continued to mutate and in fact became increasingly intelligent, had increased healing, which meant he had become physically immortal. Only one thing could stop him, however, that being cytostatic gas, which would stop his healing process, making him vulnerable again. Dr. Sampson saw Ukon as the Cog's greatest asset. With this information, he could help the Cog create the greatest weapon to use against their enemy. However, before he could do anything, the Sires took over and killed numerous staff at New Hope. Because of this, many of the remaining staff resigned or ran from the facility, leaking the information to the public, stating the processes were extremely unethical. The facility was eventually shut down due to the public response and the unethical treatment of children. However, this didn't stop Dr. Sampson and others who felt his work was far too valuable to let go. Here, the fringe political group within the coalition moved Sampson's research to the secret facility within Mount Kadar. The goal was to find the cure for rust lung and create those super soldiers Sampson was sure he could make. As Dr. Sampson continued his research, he had a breakthrough. He was finally able to create the hybrid known as the Matriarch, who was formed from the DNA of the Sires with Mira's embryotic stem cells. Finally, Dr. Sampson was able to reproduce the hybrids, finally creating his super soldiers. The Locust Horde were born, named for their potential to rain down widespread death, similar to the insect locusts. Along with this, the stem cells used within this process meant that Mira had a link to every single one of these creatures, creating a hive mind where she could control all of the members of the Locust Horde, as well as the Matriarch. Dr. Sampson began making thousands of these hybrids and placing them within stasis tanks to be studied further by the scientists. Because of Mira and her abilities, the Locust Horde were also able to read and write and quickly become more intelligent. This created a problem, however, as the Locusts quickly began wanting independence away from the science lab, believing the scientists were imprisoning and torturing them. However, without a leader, their queen, this could not happen. But during this time, Mira had begun a romantic and sexual relationship with the geneticist Dr. Torres and had a child named Reyna. Reyna, however, was found to have pure immunity as well, thanks to her mother's DNA. This terrified Dr. Torres, as he did not want his daughter to be experimented on like all the other children had. Because of it, he fled the lab, leaving Mira behind. Unaware of where her child and lover had gone, Dr. Sampson lied to Mira, stating they had both died in an escape attempt. This destroyed Mira, as she mourned the loss of her daughter and partner. She started to despise all of humanity for what they had done to her, her family, and for torturing her Locust Horde. Using her neural link, Mira started a rebellion and led the Locusts to freedom, massacring the facility staff, which included Dr. Niles Sampson. With this, Mira, Queen of the Locusts, ventured deep underground Mount Kadar and helped the Locusts build their society they would call Nexus. It was time for the Locust Horde, under the rule of Queen Mira, to start their building process, forming religions, creating a military and government, with the one goal of hitting back against humanity. But before they did, they had one more problem to solve. Whilst the Locusts were finally free from their prisons within the labs in Mount Kadar, their life now within the Hollow wasn't starting out great. Almost immediately setting up within the Nexus, the Locusts found themselves in the midst of an epidemic which was known as the Lambent. Despite being immune to the effects of Imulsion, the creatures of the Hollow started exhibiting mutations. This mutation was far more advanced than rust lung, as the parasite within the Imulsion took over the host, controlling them, making it so they infected or killed anything in their path. The Lambent Sea did not care about any other life form. Anything could be infected in its eyes, and that's what its main goal was. This made it really hard for the Locusts to fight back, as a lot of their lesser forces were being infected fast, with the mutations manipulating their body parts and extra limbs to defend their bodies from any oncoming fire from the Locust soldiers. Eventually, the Locusts were struggling to hit back. They were losing lots of ground within the Hollow, as well as soldiers who were being infected and adding back into the Lambent numbers. After a lot of area had been lost thanks to the rise in the Lambent, the war had officially started. The Horde started to enhance their military strength more, finding weapons and armor left by humans within the Hollow. The Locusts started forming their hierarchy with clear generals leading the charge, and a council working closely on the tactics to really hit the Lambent back hard. Alongside this, their religion was set up labelled the Trinity of Worms, believing that their gods were the Rift Worms who had created the Hollow. However, as the war raged on, the Locust forces started to believe that the gods had abandoned them, and that they would never be able to win this war. Queen Mira needed to take action, and the only way she felt like this could be dealt with was to meet with humanity. Here she met with Professor Adam Phoenix, whose wife Dr. Elaine Phoenix had discovered the Locust Horde shortly after the start of the Lambent War. Mira was blunt to Phoenix, stating her goal was to raid the surface of Sera and take it over to escape the fate of the Lambent. Phoenix was terrified by this plan and realized he had to solve the Lambent situation, so immediately agreed to help Queen Mira. However, said she and her forces must remain underground. The Pendulum Wars were nearing the end at this point in time, but Professor Phoenix was being forced to build the Hammer of Dawn, one of the most deadly weapons humanity had ever seen. Because of this focus on the weapon that would end the war, Phoenix found it hard to focus on the Lambent War as well, and every time he did, everything changed simply due to the evolving nature of the Imulsion. Queen Mira made this even harder for him, stating she didn't want him to kill them or the Imulsion, as that would affect all of the Locust Horde as well. As this research carried on, Phoenix focused all of his efforts on the Hammer of Dawn, with barely any time being focused on the Lambent War. Eventually the Hammer of Dawn had been launched and the Cog had won the Pendulum Wars. But because of this, Queen Mira became even more impatient and angry at the fact that humanity had failed to help her and her cause, and turned her attention to her original plan. It was time for her and her horde to take over Sera and hit humanity hard. Queen Mira, with her Lieutenant Ram, started to realize that fighting the Lambent was a lost cause. They had to get to the surface to build their society there and take it over from humanity, who had put them in that situation in the first place. They immediately started withdrawing all of their forces from the front line in the Lambent War and started to focus their effort on taking to the surface. Humanity had finally relaxed. The Pendulum War had ended. The Cogs were victorious. Once again, this could be a time of peace and prosperity, a new golden age perhaps. However, as humanity relaxed, Emergence Day began. The Locust Horde rose from the ground, attacking everything in their way. The first city to be hit was Yanamont Tyrus, which held a large army base within the city. Uzil Ram led the horde, destroying all of the base, invading the city, slaughtering its citizens. Other man-made areas had been wiped out because of the quick, relentless attacks of the Locust, but those that were able to survive were those protected by natural formations. With the Locust advancing at a rapid pace, wiping out anyone they saw, evacuations started to take place, with one place in particular being a safe place, that being Jacinto Plateau, because of its natural formation protection. The Cog government realized that something needed to be done. The Locusts were quickly taking over important landmarks and gaining humanity's technology on the way, making them even more deadly as they went along. Tyrus only had less than a month before being completely wiped out. Chairman Prescott announced a new plan to deal with this extinction event. It was time to utilize the Hammer of Dawn. With that, no one could live on this land, meaning the Locusts would be destroyed. Adam Phoenix thought this was completely unethical and protested that not only did it kill the Locust, it also killed his countrymen as well as countless other humans all over Sera. Despite being told evacuations were taking place to save humanity, Phoenix knew that using the Hammer of Dawn was only going to make matters worse. He desperately tried to come up with a new solution to this problem, but was out of time. Sera was a lost cause. The Hammer of Dawn needed to be activated. 3 days after the evacuations from Ephyra to the city of Jacinto, the Hammer of Dawn was deployed. Chairman Prescott himself was the man who launched the weapon, scorching the whole of the Sera surface. The planet was now destroyed, all apart from the Jacinto Plateau. Ashes litter the land as millions had died in the process. It was said that when the Locusts invaded on E-Day, humanity lost billions. More specifically, 25% of the human race was wiped out by this devastating force. Morale was extremely low amongst the surviving humans, with some stating that the ones that died were the lucky ones. And on top of that, the rest of the planet was sent into a post-apocalyptic wasteland where storms were more frequent and far too deadly to be out in the open. Due to how devastating this event was as well, the calendar was changed to simply BE and AE, before Emergence and after Emergence. Humanity was at a loss. Its numbers were too vast for one area. Its resources were lacking, and it seemed like the Locusts were still strong in numbers, looking to wipe out humanity from the surface completely. The Cog were the only ones who could hit back, and with the soldier known as Marcus Phoenix, as well as his crew of Cog soldiers and his father, Professor Adam Phoenix, they could find the solution to the Lambent and Locust problem and drive them back to where they came from. And that is the story behind the events of Emergence Day, the event that triggered the events of the first Gears of War game. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, why not give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and maybe leave a nice comment stating what you liked about this franchise. I'll leave my social media links in the description below, as well as my other lore playlist for if you want to watch more videos like this. Also, I really hope you enjoyed this video on Gears of War and would like to see more on it. Also, if you really like this content and want to support this channel further, you can become a Patron supporter or a YouTube channel member for ad-free early access videos. And speaking of my patrons and supporters, I'd like to thank them real quick. Big thanks to our big fish Duquesne23, Sacrum, Rhinohead and Eddie, our sharks the AVP man and Connor, and our 5 huge megalodons Sinus, Jacob Garcia, JJD896, Wow Such Gaming and Shadow SGT. Also big shout out to our YouTube channel member, our wise one Jambu, as well as all my amazing subscribers over on Twitch. All your support means the world to me and means I can make these videos for you guys, so thank you once again. But that is all for now. Thank you all so much for watching once again, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.